We're going to open a public hearing on House Bill 3480. As again, we have some people who are leaving quickly.
Thank you.
And we'll have a short explanation of the bill. Public hearing.
Thank you, Chair Roeblen, members of the committee. House Bill 3480 authorizes the Oregon Military Department to make payments to members of the Oregon National Guard exposed to hexavalent chromium while serving at a specified water treatment plant in Basra, Iraq in 2003, and who developed cancer as a result of the exposure. It directs the department to adopt rules for eligibility and amounts of payments, appropriates monies from the general fund for purposes of making payments, declares an emergency effective July 1, 2009. The background is essentially this. In 2003, members of the Oregon, South Carolina, Indiana National Guard were stationed at the Khormat Ali water treatment plant in southern Iraq. During their tour of duty, they were exposed to hexavalent chromium, a known human carcinogen. Hexavalent chromium increases the risk of lung cancer when inhaled on a regular basis for even short periods of time. Adverse effects can arise years later. The National Guard was present to protect civilian workers of KBR, a Houston-based Pentagon contractor, which had been hired to repair the plant as part of the Restore Iraq Oil project. The plant, which provides water to the southern oil fields of Iraq, had been contaminated with sodium dichromate before it was abandoned prior to the invasion of Iraq by the United States. Sodium dichromate, a substance used to clear corrosion on pipes, contains hexavalent chromium. In March 2008, civilians working for KBR sued KBR for damages. Guardsmen in Indiana subsequently filed suit against KBR in December 2008. In June 2008, a congressional hearing was held to investigate an alleged cover-up of the 2003 plant contamination and subsequent exposure of National Guard troops providing security there. According to an article in the Oregonian in March of 2009, the Oregon Guard sent 286 letters to soldiers of the 1st Battalion, 162nd Infantry Division about possible exposure. Fewer than 20 had responded to the Department of Veterans Affairs or the Guard at the time of the article. The article asserts that some 93 Oregon soldiers may still not know that they have been exposed to hexavalent chromium. The Oregon Guard sent registered letters notifying them in early March 2009 about the exposure.
Thank you. And with that, whichever of the representatives want to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Chip Shields. I represent Inner North and Northeast Portland in the Oregon House of Representatives, District 43. In early 2003, an industrial water plant near Basra in southern Iraq was destroyed and looted as Iraqi military pulled back and U.S. and British troops advanced as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Between June and November 2003, U.S. contractors, led by Kellogg Brown and Root, were brought into the plant to repair it on an operation called Restore Iraqi Oil. Clearly labeled hexavalent chromium bags were stockpiled, but much was spilled at the site. They stained the concrete floors and colored the surrounding sands in the desert in a very bright yellow. National Guard troops from Indiana and Oregon were stationed at the plant to guard and protect the KBR workers and the plant. Now, there were no shortages of warning signs of extreme toxicity. An example is when a civil medic at Blackie grew concerned that there were health problems, and he began to query the KBR, Halliburton, Iraqi Oil Company, U.S. National Guard, and British soldiers, and found that these personnel were all suffering from identical symptoms: continuous bloody noses, spitting up blood, coughing, irritation of the eyes, throats and lung, and shortness of breath. Now, there is virtually no doubt that KBR's managers knew the site was contaminated, but that information evidently was never given to our troops, and our troops were never given protective gear. Scott, Ashby and Larry Roberta will tell more about how this crime has drastically affected their lives. And Representative Cameron represents Mr. Roberta and expressed his apologies that he could not be here, but he wanted to express his support for Larry and his family in the bill. Now, there has been an outpouring of support for this bill. The family members of veterans have written in, and I'd like to share with you some of the sentiments that I've heard from other vets who've written in about the bill. Representative Shields, I absolutely applaud your stance in support of House Bill 3480. Such a measure only begins to scratch the surface of this issue. The armed forces, it is appalling to think that the sacrifices made by these men and women are barely acknowledged, and the lifelong struggles they face as a consequence of service to their country are looked upon with anything but honor. I have some experience with how it must feel to have to fight for recognition, fight for benefits, and simply fight for survival, battles which seem to make the tour of duty almost inconsequential in comparison. Bring their fight to the forefront. All veterans will benefit from championing this cause. And I think it's appropriate for us to take on this issue during the week of Armed Services Day. And as chair of the Public Safety Subcommittee of Ways and Means, I'm dedicated to making sure our nationally recognized troop reintegration program is funded adequately. That's crucial to make sure our troops have an advocate and helping hand in that fight. This bill marks this failure of Kellogg, Brown, and Root, this failure of the United States, and this failure of Oregon to protect our troops, and it marks it for history. One Guard soldier, Sergeant Nicholas Thomas, has already died of leukemia. At least 2 others of our troops have contracted cancer. In closing, I thank Julie Sullivan of the Oregonian for tenaciously investigating this issue. This bill is about marking this tragedy for history. It's all about standing up for our soldiers and their families. And I say to you, passing this bill is a very modest recognition of their pain and sacrifice. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd now like to pass it over